we've been shielded from. Eventually something is going to get through. Like you're saying, just because you try to shield your kid and protect your child, there are still serpents in the garden. I don't make the world safer for you by going out and killing all the serpents and then coming back and saying, look, the world is serpent free. You cannot kill all the serpents. In fact, if you try that, which are the serpents that survive? The most dangerous ones, the ones that are able to blend in and hide. But what I can do is prepare you for a world in which there are serpents. Things that we can joke about, there are people who really believe some of those things. And you're going to come across them in real life. And then what? If you're not prepared for it. If we're trained to always go look for the adult. And by the way, if any of you guys were that little kid who had to go find an adult to help you, how often was the adult answer satisfying? Not usually. There's a way of solving problems between people, but you never learn how to because you're always looking for the adult in the room.
Maybe I could get away too.
Have you guys ever heard of affluenza before? If you want to get really angry, look up affluenza. It was coined because of a case, I want to say it was like 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. In short, it was a kid who killed some people with his driving, and the judge let him off, basically sent him home, and just said that because of the kid's upbringing, his parents were very, very wealthy, hundreds of millions of dollars, that they had done a whole lot in their whole life to shield him from the consequences of all of his actions. You could see that the kid had done a whole bunch of screwed up stuff in his life. But because the parents were rich and influential, he never suffered the consequences of it. So the judge said that because of that, there was a diminished capacity. The kid couldn't have understood that there would be consequences for driving and killing people. And so therefore the judge let him go. And it was referred to as affluenza, like an influenza, like it was some kind of a virus or a disease. And if I'm not mistaken, the judge actually retired like right after that, like a day or two later, maybe the same day. So he kind of like did this last thing and then proved exactly the point that he said he was contesting, which is that this kid got no consequences for it. The kid got in a bunch of trouble later on, of course, no, of course, yeah.
And also not experiencing they're the ones that are not are paying to get into college.
What's the limit of something like that, though? Right? Where can you draw a line with something like that, where parents should let us suffer consequences?
And it's our fault.
How do you mean?
If we do something wrong ourselves, we should be held responsible or accountable instead of our parents saying, "Oh, for example, like a team, we don't make a team, they start blaming the coach. Like, oh, my kid's fault, it's the coach's fault."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You were gonna say?
Oh, I just had like a thought that was, there's this video I seen where it was on TikTok and the guy was talking about letting kids like fail safely, to like let them go through something, and if they like fail at it, at least they're doing it safely while you're watching them, to not like protect them so much where they don't learn from what they did wrong. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What's an area you could see is letting a kid fail safely in?
Like,
Baseball.
yeah, like falling, things like that. Like you're there to like help them when they need it, but you need to let them learn that they like what to learn from that, from mistakes.
Yeah.
Like so.
So maybe give them a helmet so they don't die, but they can still break an arm. Yeah. Now I think about that where we do find that, by the way. So for example, I was looking at a study several years ago about workplace safety, and it turns out that there's a direct correlation between how many signs you place at a workplace that talk about safety, 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 and how many worker injuries you have. Can you guess what the correlation is, though?
The more signs, the more injuries.
The more signs, the more injuries. Yeah. Because the idea is, I liken it to driving in TJ. You guys ever drive in TJ? There are way fewer accidents in TJ than there are here. But you've driven in TJ. How can there possibly be more accidents here than over there?
Because everybody's always looking out and everyone drives crazy.
Exactly, exactly. And here, why aren't people looking out?
Super falling.
we all know that we're supposed to stay between the lines. And so if someone cuts into our lane, it infuriates us, like somehow they've offended, my God, this is my lane. How could you possibly, whereas over there, the lanes are more of like a guide.
There's no lines.
Yeah, the lines are immaterial in TJ. They're there, but they're not really there. You don't see them. And so that's the thing. So everyone's driving defensively. Everyone's paying attention. It's the same in Israel. I spent some time over there. You just don't see accents over there because everyone's driving defensively. Here we have a presumption that everyone's going to follow the rules. So then when someone doesn't, it creates complete chaos in our lives. The same is true with the workplace. You have these signs everywhere that say safety, safety, safety. So we presume everybody else is going to be safe. And then so therefore I don't have to look out because they're going to be safe. And then suddenly when you're not looking out and they're not looking out, then something happens and it's just, a surprise, it's a shock to us. So yeah, it turns out that the more you stress safety with like safety posters, the more accidents you have at work. It's quite incredible. Yeah, I think we have it pretty well. I like this illustration someone from last period made. They made it during nutrition, I'm imagining, but they've even got the Captain Puerto Rico star in the center, the shield. But no matter how good your shield is, something can always kind of get through. And how badly that thing gets through that's the real question. The things that we've been shielded from, eventually something is going to get through. Like you're saying, just because you try to shield your kid and protect your child, there are still serpents in the garden. This is what we can take from Genesis. There are serpents in the garden. I don't make the world safer for you. Well, I can't make the world safer. I don't make the world safer for you by going out and killing all the serpents and then coming back and saying, look, the world is serpent-free. You cannot kill all the serpents. In fact, if you try that, which are the serpents that survive? The most dangerous ones. The ones that are able to blend in and hide. But what I can do is prepare you for a world in which there are serpents. It's one of the reasons that I'll tell you some dark humor jokes. I'm so happy I got to tell one yesterday. And I get to, it's because there are people who, the things that we can joke about, there are people who really believe some of those things. And you're going to come across them in real life. And then what? If you're not prepared for it. If we're trained to always go look for the adult. And by the way, if any of you guys were that little kid who had to go find an adult to help you, how often was the adult answer satisfying? Not usually. I mean, if you've ever been in the backseat arguing with your brother or sister and you know that you're right, and then your parents say, I'm going to turn this car around right now. Or they turn and they smack both of you. That's never the right answer. There's a way of solving problems between people, but you never learn how to because you're always looking for the adult in the room. And you're being shielded from those, from having to figure things out on your own. This is my unpopular opinion. Last period I was talking about this with regards to 26 credits. The last 3 years you only needed 26 credits to graduate. Some people can have a waiver for it this year too. And it's like when you get a diploma, quote unquote, with 26 credits, it's a really bad thing because we've basically told you you are very weak and we need to step in and protect you from yourself. It might seem like a good thing, like, oh, I get to graduate, I get to get by. But couldn't you have otherwise? Couldn't you have? Well, I screwed around a lot when I was a sophomore. Yeah, but you've had 2 years since then to fix it, haven't you? And why didn't we? My guess is because we've placed such an enormous shield around people right now, where nobody actually believes that we're not going to let you graduate. Because now it's just kind of like something that's just, well, you're supposed to. Everybody else got by for 26 credits. And I understand, though, that by doing that, we haven't just made students weaker. Man, we've made teachers very, very weak. Because we're in a bad position right now, man. We don't want to talk about it. And the position is 26 credits enough? Can you get a full education with 26 credits? Because if you can't, then that means that we have just sent the last 3 years of students out into the world with a subpar education. And yet we spend all of our time telling you that education is power. Education is your key to a better future. We just knowingly sent you out into the world with a half-ass education and therefore half-ass opportunities. Or we have to say, well, no, 26 is enough. Well, then it sounds like high school doesn't need to be 4 years. It sounds like we only need it for 2 years. And if we only need it for 2 years, we only need half as many classes, well, 40% as many classes, then it sounds like we have too many teachers, doesn't it? Sounds like we need to lay off some teachers and save a whole bunch of money. Think about how much better we could actually do if we had half as many teachers. And we had the funding, though, for those of you who are here. Sounds like we should lay off a whole bunch of teachers. We're in a really bad position, man. We don't want to talk about it, of course, and because the hardest questions in life to answer are the ones with the most obvious answers. Those are the questions we don't want to answer. Someone asks you where you were yesterday, and you're like, well, hold on, let me explain before you can even answer it. And so, what we've therefore done is we've filled the world with people who either are not ready for it, knowingly, or we have indulged ourselves and made ourselves a bunch of money as teachers and pretended like we cared about students. You can't have it both ways, man. You gotta pick one or the other. So, I think we know what the answer to it probably is. That we sent people out into the world who were not ready. And we did it because we're compassionate. Because we care. Because you guys come first. I don't know if it's compassionate to send you out there. If you have a dream of being a boxer, is it compassionate for me to grab you and go, you know what? You have that dream? Let's put you in the ring tomorrow with the world champion. No, that's not compassionate at all, man. It's just, some truths are very hard, and some decisions are even harder. And so I guess the question then becomes, what's the arrow that gets through? And one of the problems is that we won't even necessarily know where the arrow came from or what it was. In other words, we'll find ourselves in life not getting opportunities, and we're going to wonder why. Part of the opportunity may have been because you didn't speak well, because you weren't proactive. That's a big one. Anybody apply to the In-N-Out this opening? I read something about the number of applications they have. It's incredible. It's incredible. So who are they going to hire? All the applications are pretty much the same. Pretty much the same ages, the same age range, pretty much the same level of experience, pretty much living in the same areas. So how do you go through 1,100 applications to hire, 40 people, I think it is? How do you go through all that? You just pick out 40. Yeah, what it probably is probably the people who called them. Hey, I filed an application. I want to see what's going on with it. 2 days later or a day later, hey, sent in this application. The person who shows up and says, hey, I sent in an application. Can I talk to the manager? I'd like to interview for it. That's the person who's probably going to get it, the person who's proactive. But if we didn't teach you how to be proactive here, instead we were always shielding you, then you won't even realize that's why you didn't get the job. It'll just be like, I don't know why. Who knows? Can't know. Well, yeah, you can't know probably for sure, but that's because an arrow got through that you never saw coming. You got around a shield that you weren't even holding, that we put up in front of you. And the hard thing also is that it's not a shield that you guys have asked for. It isn't that we're not protecting you from anything that you've asked to be protected from. We've just made you weaker and felt good about it, pat ourselves on the back, and said we are compassionate. Problem is the rest of the world has not been doing that. We locked down here, went online. Other places in the world didn't do that. Europe didn't do that. Asia didn't do that. South America didn't do that. Certain private schools did. But largely, no, man, it did not happen. And so we have to wrestle with that, come to grips with it. We have to address it. We have to live with it, accept it. And then hopefully figure out a way to do better on it. But when we shield you from the effects of folly, when we shield ourselves from the effects of folly, from our own bad decisions, you ever gotten away with something and you swore never again, but then you did it again because you got away with it last time? All the time, man. All the time. Maybe this is the way we learn. Questions? Comments? Yeah.
For the stamp.
Yeah.
For what I put, which kind of like relates to what like everybody said, is like if we like shield people from like the consequences, they're gonna be led to believe that there's none. So they won't learn, and they'll keep doing what they do. They'll keep being foolish, and that's how the world gets filled with foolishness and with fools. And then I tied it to another quote by Robin Sharma that says, "We can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when fools are afraid of the light." So when we don't show people the consequences, again, they don't learn.
And who's to blame there?
Whoever doesn't show them the consequences, whoever's shielding them.
Yeah, shoulder. Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the ways this is one of the reasons I don't get angry with students. I get it. You know, I see the things that put us in place to be where we are. I still talk anyway. I still try, but I get it. So, others? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms?